roll. Let me take a little time off during the 4th of July. The Orioles still in first place, headed off to New York for a couple of days to take on the Yankees, and the sports world buzzing with all sorts of things as the politics buzz out in Cleveland. This guy is in the capital of the media world. He's in Washington, D.C., moved there after covering the Kansas City Chiefs for a number of years for the Star out in Kansas City. Not in time to see the Royals. Left before that thing got a little juicy, but he's down in D.C. doing features reporting, or as we used to say in the newspaper business, takeout writing. He is Kent Babb, sports reporter for the Washington Post, and inked a very interesting piece on Johnny Manziel last week that we found compelling that I wanted to talk about. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Kent Babb, that's B-A-B-B, as well as at the WAPO, as they like to say. What's going on in the nation's capital? Nothing political, right, Kent?
No, nothing. I think it's all right here. Nothing in Cleveland either, I don't think, right?
You know, I was going to say, man, with Cleveland with that parade a couple of weeks ago and the whole open carry thing going on, we did a parade here in Baltimore. If there was open carry in the parade in Baltimore, I probably wouldn't have gone.
The only kind of open carry I like is in Savannah, Georgia, where you can open carry a beer from bar to bar.
New Orleans has that same rule, that same policy, and it's a very popular policy.
Two of my favorite cities in the country. I can't imagine why.
Well, you know, and saying all of that, we're now about to tackle a very serious issue of partying, right? Like, you wrote this piece on Manziel. Look, you covered the NFL as a beat writer. You were in those Chiefs locker rooms for a number of years. Who was the coach when you were? Was that Herm Edwards during that period?
Herm Edwards at the beginning, Todd Haley, and Romeo Crennel. So I saw 2 coaching changes and a lot of losing games.
Hey, you were there the day that they flew the airplane over and the quarterback cried, right? When the Ravens played there that day, right? The Scott Pioli okay, so you were there for all of that. The Manziel thing is, and I know the Chiefs had an incredible tragedy in the parking lot and, murder-suicide, all that stuff that went on. The Manziel thing is still this evolving story, and even though it's pretty clear to me, and maybe not to him, I don't think he's ever going to play in the NFL again. He now becomes sort of that Bosworth, Mandarich, flame out, Ryan Leaf sort of footnote. I mean, at some point, he seems like he'll wind up in jail or dead, right? I mean, at this rate, unless somebody straightens him out.
It's really complicated, and I don't think that football is going to play a whole lot in his future. I really don't. And, in talking to some of the people who are really close to him, I don't really know if it matters to him. And that's weird, I think, because I think that we live in a society where sports sort of prevails over everything, and it's hard to imagine somebody who has a chance to play in the NFL who doesn't care if he plays in the NFL. That's different and unusual to us.
Yeah, if it's important to you and me as fans, why wouldn't it be important to him if he can make $100 million, right?
Well, and exactly, and because he doesn't need money necessarily, he doesn't need the NFL, and that's unusual because I think 95% of the guys who play in the NFL need the money. Well, Johnny doesn't, and so I don't think he feels like he needs the hassle where he's put on a very strict routine. He's told no an awful lot. So I think we may have seen the last of Johnny Manziel. I mean, they say maybe he'll play again if he feels like it. I just don't think it's that simple in this league.
Well, and the difficult part, and I know you've covered all of this, I've written books about it, and, when a team puts their money on Manziel, and obviously this was the goofy owner out there, Haslam, who did this. Mike Pettin's been a friend of mine for a decade and a half, right? So Pettin lands this job. He was the 8th or 10th candidate, for that job. He gets the job. He gets him off to a good start. They're winning. This kid's riding the pine, and everybody's wearing these Manziel jerseys. I go out to Cleveland every year because we play him every year. And Manziel took down many, many people, notwithstanding Pettin, along with many other people, as well as many other players. The whole organization, even their good players, all left in the offseason because of the mess, because of what it represents. And look, man, you and I go out to Indianapolis. We do these combines, all these pro days, all this stuff, all this background check. How the hell did Johnny Manziel wind up in the NFL? And obviously so many teams looked at him and said, well, there is potential for this to be a real disaster because this kid really has trouble with what is right and what is wrong, right?
Yeah. And remember on draft night that year, he fell and fell and fell. And I think some people thought maybe he was going to be a top 10 or top 15 pick, and he fell into the 20s. And, of course, the Cleveland Browns picked him because, that's been one of the most unstable franchises of the past 15, 20 years. And you're right. He's brought with him a path of destruction through the NFL. And frankly, for my piece, I talked to almost no NFL people because no NFL people would talk to me about him. He's radioactive nobody wants anything to do with him, and I get it. I mean, I understand. I mean, he was a wrecking ball through the franchise and the people that he touched. And if I got fired because of somebody, I probably wouldn't want to talk to me either. And so I think I talked to one executive who has nothing to do with the Cleveland Browns, and I just said, hey, do you think Johnny can play again? And he's like, he is so far away from even thinking about playing again or being on anybody's radar. It's just not even close. And so I don't envy anybody who I got to know Ray Farmer when he was in Kansas City, and I feel terrible for him because he's actually a really good guy, a good executive. And he was just one of those guys who got infected by the Johnny Manziel virus.
Kent Babb joining us here from the Washington Post, a longtime sports writer out in Kansas City covering the National Football League, and we thought we'd have some peace and quiet last week. The Manziel thing, last thing on that, because I know you've written about it, the whole notion of having rich parents, right? I mean, I that is the way it's been portrayed, that he doesn't need to do anything. I mean, obviously, you can piss through your NFL money pretty quickly when you've only played a year and a half and, barely got, the kind of signing bonus that you thought you were going to have. And certainly the signing bonuses have gone the other way since Sam Bradford, right? From being life-altering money to, well, you got enough to live a little while. The Manziel story is a lot more complicated than that because of his family, right?
Yeah, and it's a little bit bizarre. I don't know a whole lot about the family situation other than the fact that it's strained, it's uncomfortable. I do think that Johnny is very, very close with his mom and his sister. He's one of two children. I do think the family's had money. I don't think it's, Steve Jobs' money, but I do think it's well-to-do. They don't have to worry, things like that. They live in big houses, drive nice cars. I do think that the situation with his dad is a little bit unusual. That kept coming up in my interviews. The dad didn't get back to me in text messages, but he's the one who's called Johnny a druggie and said the best place for him would be in prison and doesn't think he may not live to his 24th birthday. I don't know, that's an unusual thing to say publicly about your son. Now, that said, a lot of people are trying to be public about Johnny just to try to rattle his cage and get his attention. And, Johnny and his dad just have a very different kind of relationship. I think they butt heads, and people have put it to me like Paul, the dad, believes that Johnny is following a little too closely in his own footsteps. Paul used to be a golfer. He thought he had a chance to be a golf pro, and I hear that he had some of his own kind of issues. And, maybe this is him trying to be protective and, trying to get in his son's head to try to shake him out of this. It's just different. One weekend he moved Johnny out of his house in Cleveland. The next weekend he's calling his son a druggie. And you don't see that very often. I'm certainly not qualified to speak on the health of families because mine is crazy. But that's just how it is. I mean, and I think that's just one of those situations where you'd love to think that he had a perfect, healthy, balanced family, and I just don't think that's the case even here.
Ken, I guess the long tail of this is social media, right? And it's because so much of this is born of social media. And I haven't told this story very often, but I'll tell you since this is the topic. I was at an event one night, a charity event, and a very young Ray Rice came up to me at an event. It was actually a Ray Lewis event, where Ray was behind the rope for some T-shirt thing that failed. Many of those things happen over the course of years. But I was there at an event, and this is in the dawn of social media. So, 08, 09, I think Ray Rice might have been a rookie that year. He had Janae with him, and he was talking to me and my wife in a bar in just a very sort of casual setting. He said, "What do you think of Twitter? Do you think Twitter can be a good thing?" So when I go to write the next book, I don't, obviously that story will be there. But Ray Rice was struggling with whether he should be on social media or not. I know you were covering an NFL team. I remember Jim Schwartz sitting on his porch down in St. Michael's one summer, the first summer we were down there. It's before he got the Lions job. It's when he was still with the Titans saying, my players aren't going to be, my guys on my defense, they're not going to be tweeting. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, Jimmy, oh, please, and I can laugh about it with him now because everyone has access to social media, but I don't know that anyone has torched their own bridge in social media quite the way Johnny Manziel has repeatedly. And I think when you're a drug addict, when you're an alcoholic, when you have this addiction to your ego and pictures and where you are and who you're doing it with and what you're doing, and locators, right? I mean, the geolocating is one of the things that they use to send the tight end from New England down the river for years because he killed somebody with his locator on his phone, for Christ's crying out loud. So I guess, what do they say? Cocaine's a hell of a drug, right? Rick James, right? But with Manziel, this has really been one of these massive, going down the tubes Charlie Sheen style. I guess he started the whole drug bender on social media. But Manziel's been one of the first athletes we've seen use social media to screw himself up, right?
Well, I mean, not only that, but I mean, I actually think that Johnny Manziel was probably our first sort of social media superstar. I mean, during the rise of Johnny, he was like the only way that people knew much about him is through his tweets. I mean, that was back in 2011, 2012. That he was among one of the early athletes, especially the young athletes. He really came of age during the time of social media, so his rise coincides with that rise, and his fall maybe coincides with social media's fall. And so, yeah, I mean, we've seen this sort of play out Truman Show style, and he's let us in a way that he probably shouldn't, I think. But, I'm probably looking at it a little more traditionally, and, I'm also not 23. And so it's a little unusual for me to have watched this sort of play out in plain view, but that's in some ways the time we live in these days. And so I think that social media is a co-star in the Johnny Manziel drama. I think that without that, I don't think he would have become this legend at Texas A&M or with Cleveland. I think that.
Well, and he also could have lied to Mike Pettin and said, I wasn't in Vegas the other night, and there would have been no evidence of it, instead of it sitting all over everyone's Instagram, right?
Well, and he's also a guy who thinks he can control the message via Instagram. I mean, there was one time where they couldn't find him, and the thought was he was in Vegas, and maybe this is the time you're talking about, and he puts a picture of his dog up, and sure enough, that was a very strange response to that, just to try to pretend like he was in Cleveland when he was actually in Vegas, presumably. And so, I don't know, he's told on himself a number of times, and Johnny's he's not a dumb guy. He's a smart guy. I just think he's read his press clippings, as they used to say. I think he thought that he was too cool and too slick and too special, and that he didn't have to play by anybody else's rules. I think that created him, and I think now it's destroying him.
Kent, about 6 weeks ago, they told me they were shutting the NFL down and, going away for a couple weeks. And now last Friday became this day where beat writers were on their phones all day and everybody's tweeting out. And Justin Tucker's getting $10.8 million of real money here. Next week, it cranks back up all over again. And I guess from the Redskins' perspective, and you being down in D.C., there's all sorts of new hope in picking up a new cornerback and Kirk Cousins. And, RG3's gone and they're coming off a playoff year, and here come the Cowboys, and where are the Eagles and the Giants? It is a nice little drama for the Redskins and a different kind of offseason for them this year. Somewhat stability, right? Somewhat.
For the first time in a long time, I think it feels like a new day with Washington. And I don't know. I mean, I've been around this a few times myself, and so I think I would always urge caution because you just never know. I mean, last year I remember telling a Baltimore fan that I thought the Ravens were going to be in the Super Bowl, and they were not in the Super Bowl. And that's just kind of the way the NFL
Joe
is.
Flacco did attend the Super Bowl, though. I did see him there, yes.
Right. And so, I mean, Washington could be pretty good this year, but part of that, I think, is because they probably play in the worst division in football. I think the Giants are going to be unpredictable. I don't know anything about the Eagles, and I think the Cowboys could be okay. I think they can have a really good offense, but I think their defense could be horrific. And so Washington could probably benefit from some of that. They could finish first, kind of like they did last year, just let everybody else lose around you. But, I love I love this time of year when it's getting ready to fire up, when we try to figure out who's going to be good and who's not going to be good, because I have learned the closer I get to the NFL, and actually the more I know about it, the more I actually don't know about it. And so I'm terrible at the prediction game. I'm terrible at knowing who's going to be any good, who's going to be in the Super Bowl. I keep trying it. I keep thinking I'm going to get better at it. But like last year when I predicted the Ravens were going to go maybe all the way, I should never make a prediction. I certainly have learned never to bet money on it.
Yeah, I would have never said the Orioles had first place pitching, but so far, we're crossing our fingers here and hoping for the best up on the trading deadline. Kent Babb can be followed out on Twitter as well as at the Washington Post. I also wrote a book on Allen Iverson. You love the troubled athlete, don't you? Isn't that your job, right, to cover the troubled athlete?
An old college professor of mine says I'm drawn to them for some reason. He tries to get very psychological about it. I'd like to think that's not true, but I definitely seem to find myself writing about sort of the guy who had it and the guy who lost it a little too often.
Well, we'll see what the next subject is for you. I'll sit around and wait for the next fall of an athlete and wait for your book on it, Ken. Great having you on, man. Always appreciate your work. We'll be following your work out on Twitter as well as at the Washington Post. And don't be a stranger around here, Kent.
Excellent. Thanks so much, man. It was great talking to you.
You got it. Great having you on. Kent Babb, you can follow him, Kent, B-A-B-B, out on Twitter. You can find me out, nasty at WNST.net. Reaches me 24 hours a day. I'm a very available individual, just like Mr. Angelos. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, carrier pigeon, fax. I've got it all going on here, including at WNST.net in our Buy a Toyota Audio Vault. That is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Simply download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in wherever your mobile device is, including our Facebook Live, our WNS TV channel now, broadcasting a live stream on YouTube when we are taping, so that's cool. And if you miss anything at all, the morning newspaper's there for you each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's free of charge. Sign up at WNST.net. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Breaking news, if it happens here during the hot summer days, as it did with Justin Tucker on Friday and as it does with Orioles comings and goings and starting pitchers and Dylan Bundys and all that good stuff. It's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You get the news first. It's the WNST Tech Service. It is our best service going on a decade now. And, of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. I'm driving you crazy and everywhere. I am Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.